live here to chat about all of the television we've watched in the last month or so, which is a really fun month because it's like the wrap up month, the finale month, all the spring stuff is ending, all of the summer stuff. If you actually watch summer television, like Love Island and Bachelor in Paradise and all of that, it's starting. If you love yourself and you don't watch that, then you probably have a to watch list or to read list or whatever over the summer that'll get you through. But we are pretty excited to be talking about a couple finales, a couple of which are not just season finales, they are also series finales, which is pretty exciting. And I've got Kate and Carey here with me, and it's been a couple weeks since we last chatted, and spring is news season. So what news do you bring me?
I can go first. So I can't remember if I've previously mentioned this, but as the historical fiction representative, I feel like I must talk about this new show called Outrageous,
Oh,
which, I didn't write down. I think it's Netflix, but I could be wrong. But it's going to follow like the real life story of the Mitford sisters, which is like real sisters from World War II, vastly different trajectories in life. So it's going to be kind of like period drama, but more in the vein of, the Buccaneers is kind of the vibe, it seems like, from the trailer, rather than like the more sweeping. It's not going to be sweeping. It's going to be parties and glitz and glam and war backgrounds. It's gonna have Betsy Carter, who plays what's her name? One of the older sisters from the Featheringtons.
oh yes,
Uh, yes, yes. So she's gonna be. I think she's the main character, and that's gonna be great because I think she's awesome. She's a great actress. In other news, Alana Haim just did Canes for The Mastermind, which is a new heist movie that's going to be coming out. I don't know anything else about it, but it looks good. And I think she has a different movie coming out even later. That's all the news I have.
That's exciting. You mentioned Bridgerton. It's not necessarily on any of our news
Mm-hmm.
agenda, but they have been doing little bits and teases and
Mm-hmm.
whatever of the upcoming
Mm-hmm.
Bridgerton. And then they also, didn't they give it like a guaranteed renewal through season 6 or something like that?
Six.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
which
that
is a
means
lot.
that yeah, because we're gonna get, Benedict is getting season 4.
Hmm.
And then season 5, I would assume, is going to be Eloise, because Eloise has been too central of a character for them to, like, you can't skip over her. You're going to have to
Hmm.
give her the next one. And then maybe they'll do Hyacinth
Okay,
or
yeah.
Gregory, because those are the only two family members. I guess, no, they could do Francesca. They might end up doing Francesca. I don't know.
They have to. I mean, I would hope they're going to do something with Francesca,
Yeah.
whether she gets a season of her own or whether she's because her story takes time, like chronological time. I could see it being
Yeah.
woven into the background of other people's seasons, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting that it has a guaranteed renewal through season 6, especially considering I guess critical reception has varied, but it is still an event every time a Bridgerton season, drops,
Yeah.
which I think is standard for a Shonda show. Like she's not aiming, like she is not a people pleaser. She is a people entertainer, which I love about her. And because at least viewership has maintained, I think that's
Mhm.
feels like
Yeah. I don't know if they'll get like 8 seasons, but I am impressed and maybe not surprised, but kind of a neutral state about them getting a season 6,
sure.
because, yeah, like you said, that even if the quality is not always consistent, it's not always hitting the mark of the Queen's season.
Yeah.
Um, it it is very much an event. Everybody watches. I bet tons of people renew their subscriptions. It's probably a big money
Yeah.
grab for them. So it's probably, especially since it's not using a ton of graphic effects or whatever, it's a lot of sets and costume pieces
Yeah.
that they can, in a lot of ways, reuse. I bet it makes them a lot of money in the back end.
Yeah. In the long run. Yeah. Especially once you get like a stable enough audience that I
Mm-hmm,
hate to say it,
mm-hmm.
but even if you have kind of a flop season, you can sort of get through that.
Yeah.
Not calling any of the first 3 a flop seasons, but they had their hits or misses. And as you're alluding to, in my opinion, none of them were quite as good as Queen Charlotte's spinoff
Yeah.
season, which I don't even know like whether the viewership or the only critical reception I care about is mine. and and y'all's. That's about it. So I don't really know how well received Queen Charlotte was, but if it was as well received as I perceive it to be, maybe they'll also
Hmm.
toss in a little, spin-off season
Yeah.
here or there. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I can think of some side characters who that would, kind of work for. Um, in cancellation news, um, kind of top of the agenda tonight, but Suits LA is canceled, and I don't think that's particularly surprising either. What is surprising to me is Wheel of Time is canceled um, from Amazon Prime. That was one that the first two seasons were really strong. The third season, you might recall it like completely flew over my radar until it had like already started dropping. And I was like, why did I not see any promo for this? It also
Mhm.
wasn't that good. And now it's canceled. So that is interesting. Amazon Prime is very loose-handed with its cancellations, even with like what was previously like a flagship show for them. But not, I guess, inherently surprising. We'll also talk about Handmaid's Tale very briefly. That's not so much canceled as it was, kind of naturally and collaboratively ended at the end of season 6. But yeah, it's the time of things coming to an end. Some very
Mhm.
early. The Suits LA cancellation, that is very early.
Yeah.
Better news. Aerocast is confirmed for DragonCon. Very excited. Me and, 3.5 people left in the world who care about Aerocast probably. Super excited. All 3.5 are all here in this room right now.
Mhm.
Yes. So we've got Emily Bett, David Ramsey, Colton Haynes, like quite a few. So exciting.
Oh, wow.
I know. That's like, I can't even remember the last time they were all
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, because I know it was Colton Haynes, but was it David Ramsey that was at the one that we went to in
Yes.
the last year? Okay,
Mhm.
but Emily is surprising.
Yeah.
Good for a
She's
ticket.
confirmed for Dragon Con before, but then she's canceled. So that's why I'm sort of like,
Yeah.
what kind of hero cast? Yay. But I'll kind of believe when
Yay.
I see
We'll
it.
see.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I think she does have a reputation for canceling.
That she does. Which is okay. It's been a million
Yeah.
years, and I don't know that she's necessarily like camped out in the like sci-fi filmography or the comic filmography since then. Like she's done,
Hmm.
the period boxing piece. She's done, like she's real in the like indie, kind of film space.
Mm.
So I don't really know what the big crossover would be between that and like a comic book convention that sometimes like celebrates older or retired shows type thing. So I kind of get it.
Hmm.
We'll see. I think it'll be really fun. All right, Carrie, what about you? Do you bring us any good news, bad news, cancellations, celebrations?
No cancellation celebration. Can you guys hear me well?
Yeah, we can. Hmm.
Fantastic.
Can
Because
you
my
hear us?
screen on my yes, I can hear you fantastically. My screen is frozen for some reason, but that's neither
Mm-hmm.
here nor there. No, the only news that I bring is that
Yeah.
Kristen Ritter will be joining Daredevil Born Again season 2. Um, full disclosure, I like the idea of Daredevil Born Again. I like the idea of Daredevil. I have not seen 1 minute of the show. But the fact that Kristen Ritter and her Jessica Jones will be joining season 2 gives me all the reason in the world to want to watch it. So I will start doing so.
I love Kristen Ritter so much. I will literally watch anything she's in, from your half-hour like comedies, Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, to like the gritty Jessica Jones. She is fantastic. I don't know how she hasn't become bigger than what she is. I'm excited about that. That's great news. Let's dive into Suits LA slash Suits in general, because at this point we can just kind of take a look at the broader Suits cinematic universe. And I'll start with just kind of a general question. How did Suits end for you? Did it meet your expectations, not meet, exceed? How did you feel about the end of theoretically the Suits cinematic universe for now?
So here is absolute full disclosure. There may be disappointment abounding, right?
Okay.
But I have not watched the finale yet.
Okay.
I am
Mixed flavors.
probably a yeah, and no, it doesn't matter. I'm probably a couple episodes away from being at the finale,
Okay.
but I've watched obviously enough episodes and I've sort of done enough reading and gleaning information to know how it sort of concluded.
Hmm.
And from what I've seen of the series, what I've heard about how it concluded, it's a little bit disappointing in that from how the show started, there was this really big, significant fracturing of relationships between the two leads, which was
Hmm.
sort of the driving force along with the mystery of the flashbacks. It was essentially the
Right.
driving force for the series, in my estimation.
Hmm.
And to sort of, I mean, obviously, it's not a situation where I need to see a storyline or narrative thing carry out for like multiple seasons, but if that's the sort of big sort of fracturing, the sort of driving force for your series, for your show, and it's sort of by the end of season one, it's sort of status quo.
Hmm.
It makes you sort of wonder, well, what was the point of starting that way or doing that if just by the end of the season you're going to be sort of back to where you started? Um, I personally would have appreciated, and there's probably still room to do it. I would have appreciated it more if they obviously continuing to be adversaries was sort of what sort of pulled me in. They
Hmm.
could have gotten to the point where they were perhaps friendly adversaries, and that would have made for some exciting television in terms of fighting over clients and sort
Kind of
of
like
that
Harvey
sort of
and
end
Lewis.
game. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would have I think that would have been exciting. That would have been fun to see. I don't
Hmm.
know if that's what they would have gone for in season two, but
Hmm.
long story, even longer. And disappointment is probably what I would say is what I felt for how season one or the series of Suits LA concluded.
I think I agree with you. I was always just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Where am I going to find at least a side character or a side storyline that's so engaging to where I'm like, oh, I'd watch this even if everything else, kind of sucked. And we start, there'd be a little bit of like, okay, I really like Erica or, whatever. But nothing ever took hold strong enough such that even by the end of the season, I was like, wow, I can't wait to see what happens to them in season two. And I think a lot of it maybe just belied a disconnect with what viewers might be interested in. I think about the final end where, Ted is, torn between two women, and then they're like, well, we can just kind of all kind of coexist. And so I don't know the perspective there. And I just, it shows a disconnect, not even just in sort of like what characters we'd be interested in, but also what dynamics we'd be interested in. If we're gonna kind of lean into this sort of like soapy LA and there's love triangles and whatever, I'm really not interested in the like, well, of course you're, also hanging out with other girls. Like it's just like, I don't know, is this an 80s soap opera? Let's try to, I don't know. It wasn't working for me from the like romance and character development perspective. Like we land him in the same place that he was when he was like having cringy threesome dreams. So there, from like a, you know, romance, and it also is like an internal character perspective, we don't really see any progress when we see, these like side characters vying for like who's going to be top dog. We don't see any progress. We don't see anybody clearly come out on top. We don't see an emotional fallout of somebody not coming out on top or an emotional fallout of somebody coming out on top. We deal with really serious themes like, oh, because of the job that you did before, this person died. This person got off, but they were innocent. This person got off, but they were guilty. This person went to jail, but they're innocent. Those kind of like, life or death or made to feel life and death situations. We deal with those themes, but it's done in such a way that we're not really left conceptualizing some of the like side characters or villains of the week or whatever as like real people, which is the like number one thing you kind of have to do, whether you're having to suspend disbelief or not. If we're supposed to care about life or death and it's not our main characters who are living or dying, but it's these side characters, we really need to invest in them. We really don't. We're kind of proposed this idea of like one of our, main recurring side characters might be developing some sort of love affair with one of the lawyers. That's squelched down. No, he's still into, somebody else who doesn't like him back, but she does like him back. But at this point, do we actually care? It's a very low stakes outcomes for high stakes topics, such that by the end, when we're left watching the finale knowing good and well there's not a season 2 because we already got the cancellation, we feel no stakes at all. We feel no draw to season 2 or no questions of like, well, what would have happened? I don't even know what to question of what would have happened. I couldn't possibly care, which actually leads into one of my follow-up questions for you, which is, obviously the cancellation was announced before the finale. How did that impact your viewing experience? Is that why you haven't got to the finale, or why you haven't cared enough to get to the finale at this point? Is there something you actually would want out of the end of this season or season 2 that would keep you watching?
Um, the cancellation absolutely positively had played a role in my zest to watch the finale, or quite frankly, my sort of I don't want to say indifference toward watching it, because I actually do want to watch it, but it certainly played a role in sort of my overall malaise about what this season was. And it goes back to one of the first conversations that we had about this show. And it's like, what is its purpose? What is it trying to do? What does it want to do? And quite frankly, even by the number of episodes that I have seen, from what I've heard about how this show ended, I don't know how to answer that question, and that's a terrible place to be in after watching 10 or 11 episodes of a show. I don't know what it was trying to be. I don't know what the purpose was. And to your point, or to answer your question, having it, knowing that it's canceled, it's like, well, if I'm 10 episodes in and I don't know what this show was trying to be, there's no rush for me to sort of get to the finale when I've kind of sort of heard that it just sort of ends where the show sort of began, with like
Mm-hmm.
no real sort of development. Um, I think and this doesn't answer your question, maybe for what I would have liked to see in season 2, is probably what I would have liked to have seen overall. I
Mm-hmm.
think if they had sort of dove into this being Suits LA, and sort of really playing up LA and Hollywood, and not just sort of, I mean, they did it to some degree in terms of some of the clients they represented, moguls and movie
Mm-hmm.
stars and that sort of thing. But I feel like if you're going to do Suits LA, I think it would have been a better idea to sort of try to sort of update what LA Law did in, say, like the 80s or whatever the
Mm-hmm.
case may be, as opposed to just taking Suits and slapping an LA on it when there's really not much LA of what this show is.
Agree.
I would, yeah, I would have like dug into, like, let's get into what LA is about, what it was, what it is, and what it could be, and lean into that aspect of it more. Maybe do some stunt casting, stir up something, bring. Uh, it's just a really tough show when basically your lead is a person that sort of, I don't want to say it's sort of like an emotional black hole,
Mm-hmm.
in that he sucks everything in. There just wasn't a whole lot of light. There wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of joy. There wasn't a whole lot of fun. And when you don't have those things, you need to have other reasons to be compelling, and there just weren't enough of
There wasn't a, kind of a levity or a brightness that would allow Ted Black to be a contrast. If you're going to have this, like, kind of stoic, morose, I've been through everything, but I'm still such a good lawyer. You know, like the Batman lawyer thing, the
Mhm.
shtick they were going for with him, what he was typecast for. It needed to be contrasted with some lightness, but everybody around him was also morose in their own way or quite serious in their own way. There wasn't the pizzazz and over the top and larger than life and like, when somebody seems like they're like kind of on low levels of cocaine all the time, which I feel like would be a very quintessential LA, kind of character thing to bring into the room. There wasn't any of that. Everybody seemed on downers all the time. Like it lost that sort of like brightness, larger than life, even artificial larger than life that I think other shows have captured about that city and about that place. And by putting it in a legal setting, I get it. There's this inherent like gray and serious, and you're always dealing with people at their worst. But the original Suits managed to do it in New York, a very gray and serious city,
Hmm.
by having that contrast, by having the Lewis that contrasted Harvey, by having the Mike and Rachel where they contrasted each other's seriousness and lightness in different ways. Harvey and Donna, all of that, both the like platonic and like semi-romantic relationships as well. You've got Mike's grandmother, whatever. You had these kind of high contrast relationships that allowed you to be really engaged and invested in a show that was also somewhat, witty when it wanted to be. Whereas this one felt very, it felt like TikTok jokes, but said in a sad way.
Which is what I would have done if someone had come to me and said, "Hey, how we're going to retool season two," I would have put Rick and Erica very much at the front of what season two is going to be
I
about,
agree.
and basically have them sort of go at it in terms of who's going to be representing who. How am I going to get this client? How am I going to get you out of that client? And
Hmm.
obviously do it in a way that sort of highlights their professional and personal relationship. And then you could sort of play Ted a little bit more off of that. I think that would have, if someone had said, "Hey, this is what the show should probably be," that's probably what I would have told them to do.
I think I agree with you entirely. And, we won't get a season two, but it is interesting to think about it in that way. It's interesting as we kind of look back on like the Suits cinematic universe at this point. Suits LA was in a pretty tough niche position. It's a late game spinoff. It's not a remake, but it also didn't spin off from the original show. It didn't spin off during the original show. It wasn't a backdoor pilot like Pearson was, which was fantastic as well. So I'm left critiquing it, but I also want to think about what the challenges or, I guess benefits, but the challenges are for this unique situation. I feel like I can clearly say it didn't rise to the occasion, but I recognize that it had some difficulties in, not having 100% access to the original cast, not getting to spin off from the original show, and that tonal gap becomes more pronounced because we never see these characters interfacing with the original characters, which were done in a way which was engaging, has stood the test of time. There's plenty of flaws I could pick apart with the original show, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who wouldn't recognize a stark quality and entertainment difference between the original show and this.
I I can comfortably say you are correct because it was probably just yesterday or the day before that I watched the pilot for Suits, and it was absolutely um, like night and day. Just the first 4 or 5 minutes of that pilot, and I know pilots are different because there's a whole lot of time and effort and money and work that goes into a pilot that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
always go into the regular episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But there was just so much energy and excitement and sort of fun tension and you, in the 4.5 minutes of the first freaking pilot, I was freaking hooked. And I
Mm-hmm.
cannot say the same thing about Suits LA. And watching that pilot episode, you saw the things that were great about Harvey, you saw the things that obviously the blind spots that he had, how selfish he could be, and you're just sort of sitting there waiting to see or trying to find out going forward how those flaws and how his sort of things that he's really good at, how do those things balance themselves out? And one of the benefits that I think that Suits had was that first of all, I feel like he was a more charismatic character
Yes.
that goes without saying, but he also had characters that you saw that cared about him. And even as selfish as you keep hearing that he is, and quite frankly, he's incredibly selfish to the point where he could probably bring down his employer, but you could see how good it was he was at his job, and you could also see the little bit of hints of how compassionate he could be if he chose to do so. It's
Hmm.
just that in Suits LA, Ted's character was just written in such a sort of one note way that it was like there wasn't any light there. It was just sort of Ted Black's character sort of served as a black hole where he sort of drew everything to his darkness. Where I
Hmm.
feel like Harvey was sort of like the sun at a picnic, and everyone wanted to be around him. And
Hmm.
that was, I mean, that's a stark difference. That's night and day, and that's sort of what we got here.
Yeah, there's sort of this like star power to where even when Harvey's like at his moodiest or Jessica's in a mood or any of the like serious big name power players are like in that space, there's still a star quality which brings some brightness to them. And also, thinking back to the Suits pilot, which I forced people to watch it, so I've watched it a good few times myself. You really see character development within that single pilot. We see this is how Harvey's going to change by being exposed to Mike. This is how Mike is going to change by being exposed to Rachel. This is how Jessica is going to change by being, forced to deal with these people who are nowhere near her level. Like you see that played out in the pilot, and it makes you excited to see how it'll play out episode to episode. And even when you have your flops, or you have like a storyline that doesn't go a way that you think would be most entertaining, you're still left wanting to see the character development play out.
Hmm.
Whereas with Suits LA,
And
other than Erica and anybody who is going up for or against her, I didn't really care that much. And even then, it was like that's just what was closest to making me care about something.
yeah, and the other thing that was sort of really stark by contrast is that obviously you had Harvey who, and quite frankly, a whole lot of other folks who were doing something that they were really good at and
Hmm.
doing something that they cared about,
Hmm.
and doing it well. Whereas you had from the very beginning, you had Ted doing a job that he didn't want to do,
Right.
and he did not hide it one bit. So it's like, okay, I'm watching a guy who doesn't like to do what he's doing, and now I'm forced to watch him do it. Give me a reason to want to continue watching. And I know it sounds like I'm crapping on the show, but because there were some things that I actually liked about Suits
Hmm.
LA. But quite frankly, after watching the pilot, and I've only watched a pilot of Suits, it's kind of startling to me that they would call this show Suits LA. You could have called it anything else. And you
Hmm.
just have to wonder, it's certainly name recognition, and that certainly helps sell the
Hmm.
show. But there did not seem to be a whole lot of narrative ties, or thematic ties, or just sort of any sort of fibers that connect the two other than the fact that they brought Harvey on there.
Hmm.
That was sort of the startling part. And I remember we had the conversation obviously this is before I had watched any of Suits, and it was about how would someone who's watched Suits and how would someone who's never seen it sort of respond to this show. And I have to
Hmm.
give you a lot of credit because you still gave it a chance. And I
Hmm.
must say, after only watching an hour and 10 minutes of Suits, I would have turned Suits LA off and said, "What the hell are they doing here?"
I have a really high tolerance for bad television. I'm really willing to see things through. And the premise of a spinoff so far after the fact was somewhat interesting to me structurally. The tie, I have a pre-developed tolerance for a Mel, so I'm like, okay, that's not going to bother me. I know the whole stoic, morose, thing he brings to the table, whatever. There were plenty of things where I should have been the target, audience here, even if it took a while to get itself off the ground, even if it took a while to like pick up some storylines. I should have been the one being like, well, here's how season two could actually, here's what they need, and I could do that, by the way, if this was actually in a place where it was going into season two. They're given the green light because of name recognition, even though season one was like kind of bad. I could sit here and I could list you the things that would fix it for season two, that would make it better. The show's not leaving people like me with like some reason to do that, with some reason to fight for it. You have to have at least a stronghold, not just the name, but you have to have like, oh, they were able to get this character to show up, or they were able to get me attached to this, and everybody else might be a hellhole, but I can tell you how to fix it. It's like I can kind of take or leave it. Maybe something else that comes from this creator will be good. This was brought by Erin Korish. She had written it a while back. I think there's a good chance if it wasn't tied to the Suits name, it would never. The pilot may not have even been made, and a lot of pilots get made. It would certainly have never got a television spot, but maybe something else will come from this creator that is more in line with the spirit of original Suits, even if it's not in the universe of the original Suits. Well,
That feels like the major failing of it.
yeah, it's interesting. However, one good thing that did come out of it is you did watch the pilot of Suits, so now I get to bother you every single time we go live to tell me what you think of Suits. Insofar as you've watched it since then, and Kate watched, I think, most or all of the original Suits back in the day, so that can be a mutual. You didn't watch any original Suits, Kate?
I've never watched any of it.
Stop! I swore you did.
No.
Oh,
We should we should
you both
we
need to
should
get
have
on
to watch it. We should
quickly.
have to watch it together and bring like a book report.
Yes, MLA citations and everything. What, Kate? What? Oh, okay. Get on that.
I'm going to
It's
watch it.
not
So
old in the way that you wouldn't like. I don't like watching old stuff too. It's not old in that way. It'll hold up.
No,
It's fine.
I mean, like, I'm not against watching old stuff. I'm watching Stargate, which started before I was born, and then we just recently started Eureka, which is also a 2006 show, which is not as old, but I'm not against like older shows. It's just like, I guess the lawyer thing. I've tried different like Law or I'm
It's
sorry,
not like
Carey.
that. It's not like Law and
I'm
Order or any of that
I
shit.
know, I know.
It's totally different.
I'm over here getting crushed. She's talking about before she was born. What year were you born again?
2000.
Oh God. Oh, oh.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
As-
and that's valid.
yeah.
Some people were born then, not me though.
Some people,
Um,
yeah. And but I may watch the first episode and see if I like it. But I'm also like really behind on shows that I've been like, I want to watch this.
yeah.
So I'll probably have to catch up on those first. But maybe
Yeah.
if I ever reach the bottom of that list, I will watch Suits.
You'd like it. It's entertaining. Does it need to be
Yeah.
top of your list? No. You'll live. But
Is it entertaining in the way like Arrow's entertaining, where like they have really strong moments, and then there's times like, what am I watching?
it's definitely more entertaining than Arrow. It definitely has better micro dialogue than Arrow. It has better acting than Arrow.
Okay.
The ship quality, like the writing for the romance is marginally better than Arrow, but obviously when you start comparing chemistry, that can become a matter of taste.
Yeah.
I would not put Stephen Amell as like a great performer up there, but I would put Emily and Stephen's chemistry up there as like probably some of the best in the last few decades of television. Harvey and Donna have the same thing, so it's going to depend on taste level because they're two very different kind of
Yeah.
compatibilities. There is some, if you are kind of like a romance junkie, there is it's like a very unique type of ship on Suits where when you're introduced to it, they already know each other and have known each other for years, like many, many years.
Mhm.
So there's this like familiarity with each other that allows for them to be very funny, allows for them to be very tender and caring in a way that some ships don't get to until like season 5 or so. The actors had already known each other for like 20 years when they were cast in the role. So there's a few like lightning
Mhm.
bottle type things that made it really good. But if you're like, well, I want a really good law storyline, like this is not like whatever. It also doesn't have like the same format as like Law and Order. Like if that's your thing, it's very very different from that. I would compare
Oh,
it more to like in terms of structure and vibe or like TV structure. Um, More like a Burn Notice or even like this is a totally different genre, but maybe like a Breaking Bad type vibe where it's like there's sort of these long form stories, even though they
Mhm.
may have like a task of the week.
Yeah. I haven't watched either of those, so that's not really giving me much. But maybe there is like this small bit of like, there's the three big revered careers. There's the law, there's
Mhm.
medical, and there's engineering. And I'm looking at the law and the medical, like they've got tons of shows. I'm like, what am I doing?
We do need an engineer show.
It's because it would be really boring. It would be so boring. So I know why there's
I
not
think we
I
could.
didn't.
I
show.
mean, you.
I wasn't gonna say that, but yeah,
It
probably.
really
I'm guessing you're not going to take Big Bang Theory as a suitable answer for that.
No, I
Good.
think I
You
think
shouldn't.
they at least no. I
Well,
there
they made fun of the
I would
engineer
argue
on
that
that
they
show.
do make like a lot more. They make a lot more like nerds being nerds as a comedy show type show, which I guess fills that gap a little bit, but it's not the same.
I think the greatest sort of engineer show of all time would have to have been MacGyver, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to call it that. I think that's what we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep, you got MacGyver, and then there's a handful of shows that have main character as an engineer, but they're not. That's not the show. So
Yeah.
Maybe you need to write one.
I was going to say,
oh,
it sounds like you should make that in your spare time, Kate.
okay.
Well, Kate, we're hearing what you didn't watch this last week or last month. What did you watch? What else did you watch
Okay.
this week?
So in the vein of older
Mm-hmm.
stuff,
Sure.
there's tons of movies I've never seen, and I have people in my life that are really upset about it. So I watched The Librarian: The Quest for the Spear,
Mm-hmm.
which is the original content, and then there's the Librarians, the TV show that spun
Mm-hmm.
off of it, and now they've actually announced a new spin-off from that TV show. So that's fun. But that was a fun movie. It very much is Indiana Jones for nerds.
Oh, nice. Okay. Love that.
Yeah, the main character is like instead of being Indiana Jones qualified or capable, he's just really smart. He knows a bunch of things, and then he has like a badass woman that kind of protects him
Uh-huh.
throughout his adventures, and then he outsmarts the bad guy, and it's goofy, it's funny, it's a little more lighthearted than Indiana Jones, a little more respectful for women than Indiana Jones, but
Uh-huh.
it's fun. And then I also
Yeah.
watched The Last of Us. So I'm in the middle of episode 4.
I'm also in the middle of episode 4.
Ooh.
Okay, twins. What are you thinking of it so far?
So, I think I've mentioned previously, like, I didn't play the game, but I'm like fandom adjacent to it. So I know a ton of stuff going on before I get into it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of the same as season 1. I don't have like the nostalgia attachment to it. So there are some times in the storyline where I'm like, why are we spending so long on this?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we not getting to the whole thing? And I am missing that in season 1 they had a lot more, even by now, they would have had a lot more episodes where like they really focus in on this one character, this one
Mm-hmm.
couple, that
Mm-hmm.
story.
Yep.
That was really, really good that I liked about season 1. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel that way in season 2, but I do think it has other strengths.
Mm-hmm.
I am enjoying seeing kind of this trek, like like these two people on this journey together trying to enact this vengeance that they see
Mhm.
necessary, and the evolution of their friendship, their bond, their connection as they go on with it. I also think that in the world building aspect, they've also introduced a whole lot more factions and different groups of
Mhm.
people that all kind of are problems. And I do think that if you're not going to do a lot of the really, really intimate character stories,
Mhm.
that's also interesting, because if you're talking more about like what this world would look like, once you get into like a season 2, you would have to start asking questions of, there has to be more people out there, there has to be more
Right.
cults and more groups. And it's like there's the militant, and then there's like the militia militant, and then there is the highly cult like, and then there is the one that they're coming from, which is very much more of like a commune.
Mhm.
And they're all the different cultures kind of clashing, trying to decide how they're going to survive post-apocalyptic.
Right. What do you think of Ellie this season? I find her to be written so differently, portrayed so differently. She seems to have
Mm-hmm.
aged a lot across, not in terms of looks at all, but just in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how they've written her. Last season, she was, written in a way that felt like very young teen, and now she feels more old teen. And I know that
Mm-hmm.
seems very adjacent, but that feels very different considering the amount of time that's passed. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
I mean, so it's supposed to be a 5-year gap, and I guess that would equate a lot. Like
Sure.
in, if you knew a 13-year-old versus an 18-year-old, there's a
Right.
massive gap.
Yeah.
And I do think like in the first season, I think she was written with a lot more fear, and she still had the anger, but she also had a lot more of that youthful curiosity, and she got into like, like preteen, young teenage hijinks still.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has worn off. And she still has moments of that. I mean, she does laugh every once in a while,
Hmm.
but a lot of that has kind of flaked off. And you're still seeing like the anger that was there has really codified
Hmm.
into something. Like she was already showing signs of being incredibly impulsive
Hmm.
and rash in season 1.
Hmm.
And there's a lot more of that in season 2, but there's also a lot more skill to kind of back that up,
Hmm.
which I don't know if they're ever going to go here, but I think as a character, that makes her incredibly dangerous to herself and the people she's around. If she is more skilled, but there's also a lot of people telling her, but she's only like 80% of what she should be.
Right.
And as somebody like, as a character that is that physically small, that is a fair point, that
Hmm.
she's skilled, but she is so small that she has a lot of the physical difficulties that she'll face in a world like this.
Hmm.
um, but she doesn't always think that way.
Hmm.
So she takes on people twice her size and has come out the other end so far alive, but
Right.
eventually she might
But not
not.
everybody has.
Not everybody has. And then kind of on that front of not everybody has, it's clear like she's going after Abby.
Right.
And in the video game, Abby was a lot bigger than her. So I
Mm.
do think that the fact that Abby is a much smaller person, like she's about the same size as
Hmm.
Ellie is, I think that is an interesting thing. It
Hmm.
makes Abby a little less intimidating.
Yeah.
But Abby's also like, Abby was a character for 5 years driven by rage and anger and hatred. And she's kind of done what she thinks will fix it. And we'll probably eventually see another episode focused on her where it probably will kind of make her realize it didn't fix a thing.
Right.
And having to deal with that, both grief and guilt of she's finally having to deal with the loss rather than just the pain and the
Hmm.
anger. And what will probably end up happening is we'll see them both kind of come to like a similar conclusion of killing each other like back and forth is not going to solve anything, just like we're
Hmm.
seeing kind of on the macro scale with all the different cults and different factions killing each other isn't fixing anything.
Yeah. It's it's interesting. I took a pause after episodes 1 through 3, which is
Mm-hmm.
what I had gotten to the last time we actually talked about it, if you remember. Because a major plot point at the end of episode 3 made it almost feel like a season finale, and so I just was like, okay, we'll process that. And several
Mm-hmm.
episodes piled up while I was watching other things, and now I've kind of gotten back into it. So I've just started episode 4 as well. which means we'll be watching around the same time. I'm
Yeah.
just interested to see Ellie's journey from here, and you know where she's kind of primed to take this. As again, not knowing the video game storyline, but being familiar with video game storylines as a concept, there's a lot I can expect as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of new characters this season, and I knew about a handful of them, but I'm surprised by how much I like other ones.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, out of nowhere, Dina has become my favorite character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and maybe it's because, like, she is, at the point that you're at, like, you can tell she's a really loyal friend, and she
Uh-huh.
really cares about the people around her. But I also like, and maybe it's just me, I like a character with a head on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And even if they make mistakes, like, there is a logic there. And so she is the level headed one of the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really fun balance.
Yeah.
Um, and then I also really like the therapist. The therapist is a funny character,
Yes. A phenomenal actress as well.
a phenomenal actress. Yeah. And that's a really great character that has a lot of complexity in herself, but it's also just like a really interesting breath of fresh air in this very dark show with how like the dark morbid humor that she brings to it.
Mm-hmm. It's I'm happy to see with the pacing that it kind of seems like they're taking their time. They're not rushing things. They're giving time for Ellie to have her little pseudo therapy meeting, even if she's not really participating, or to, develop relationships and friendships around her, which is, it kind of ties into what I watched this week, the end of The Handmaid's Tale, the series finale of The Handmaid's Tale. Just dropped a couple days ago. So I'm not going to necessarily spoil the finale per se, but I will say structurally, the show was so interesting because we're following, June and the handmaids and all of their journey across all of this. And the show came to a known end. So they ended the show not on some sort of like last minute haphazard cancellation, but this was the end of the story, the end of the show. It ended with, substantially good ratings and certainly critical acclaim. I really can't think of a better end for a show in terms of like reception and ratings and all of that. It's a flagship show for Hulu and stayed that way the entire time. But it was based on a book, which I, never read. But by the end of the show, it had kind of gone above and beyond what the book had covered, which is great. And with shows that go for 6 seasons, but for shows that go with any seasons, I often find that the ending feels at least a little rushed, most of the time very rushed. You have your major conflicts happening truly in the last 10 minutes of the final episode, because that is how TV works. And then you have the denouement, the end, the ashes falling, the, find out what happens after, for, if you're lucky, the final 10 minutes. And what I loved about The Handmaid's Tale is they actually chose not to do that. We see the final conflicts happen, no major spoilers, but really in the final, like, 2 or 3 episodes for a couple different pieces. And we get to see moments of the denouement, the fall. Where do they land and where do they go from here? For the majority of the final 2 episodes, really. And they did such a beautiful job with almost all the characters really getting those moments. And in the moments of conflict, the end of The Handmaid's Tale, this is not like a spoiler, but it is a true war across multiple countries and civilizations. And, wars involve weapons and mass executions and bombs and like all of that. It has all of that. But the moments of like most intense conflict are face-to-face discussions regarding perspective, ideals. You're fighting in the name of God. I'm fighting in the name of God. Who's right here? And the way they do that without having those moments be boring and the big, explosions and stabbings and this and that, whatever, be the exciting part. is just masterfully done. It's fantastic. And all of this is based on a book, and it's, the handmaid telling her own tale. So obviously it's going to end with these moments of like, how and why do we document these stories? And they do that in a way that remains engaging. You think of, Kate, at least for you and I, we've watched many a movie or show that starts with somebody sitting at a writing table or somebody sitting at a typewriter starting their story, and then you pan in and see the
Mhm.
story. And it's cliche, and I love that. That's
Mhm.
totally fine. That's not necessarily going to like draw in mass audience all the time. So having it end in a way where it's clear how and why she's documenting what she's doing, in the context of, if you know the show, her daughter is stolen, from her, and raised by, the Gilead, the society of, very, different and opposing beliefs from her, and how that ties into why she would even need and want to document this. It's obviously very poignant in today's age. From the time the show started to the time now, it went from like a, weird, dystopian whatever to like, seeming oddly like a documentary. But by the end of it, they had the opportunity to lean into that, what I'm going to call too far, if they wanted to. If you think maybe like about 2 years ago, all of us talked about there were a good couple shows like Supergirl, whatever, that just like they didn't use metaphor, they didn't use analogy, they just full on like heavy handed did like Supergirl, but she exists in the exact same carbon copy of today's United States. Let us tell you what she do. And it's like, okay, it's cute. I agree. Like we're here. I'm on the same side. I get it. We don't want the, orange guy, killing people in the name of liberty to win. Your metaphor has been received. Thank you. Like whatever. Handmaid's Tale had every opportunity to do that, by the way, and they didn't. It's very clear exactly what side they'd fall on, and it's like, cool, I'm on the same side, but they didn't like lean too much where it like seemed dated by the end. Fantastic. 10 out of 10. Watch Handmaid's Tale if you haven't yet, although it is like very, trauma, trigger, content warnings, whatever. But if you can get through that, fantastic. I cannot think of like structurally a better way for a show to end. And I don't mean in a like goosebumps, wow, that one liner. I mean, in like, they did it right. Like they ended on perfect terms.
Nice.
The end. Carrie, what about you?
Um, that was a lot. Um, so let me do this if you don't mind editorially. So I will tell you what I've watched and also sort of use it as an opportunity to tell you who my women of the week were because it sort of
Yes.
all falls in together. If that's cool.
Yes, please.
All right, so I have watched Andor season two. I think it was 12 episodes. If you have not watched Andor, I don't know if you are like sort of folks who appreciate and like Star Wars or not, but I would highly recommend and highly suggest that give Andor um, a watch. Even if you're not a Star Wars fan, it's an incredible sort of story about the brutalities of fascism and
Mhm.
how you have to rise and fight against it and how it impacts and how it affects the little people, not just the space wizards and warlocks with laser swords.
Mhm.
It's intense, it's gritty, it needs to win all of the awards at award
Mhm.
season. Awesome. Um, but it's also who all of my women of the week are. It's sort of like when you watch a show and you think about, well, who was the character that did that really cool thing that I really appreciated? Or who's the character that sort of set this whole thing in motion? Or who was that villain that we hated their guts, but every time they were on the screen, we loved how they sort of interacted with someone else? Who was the character that sort of sacrificed and sacrifice upon sacrifice, and no one ever saw it, but the audience knew that it was necessary, needed to happen? Watching a show like Andor, particularly Andor season two, you've come to quickly realize that 95 to 99% of the characters who did those things were all women.
Mhm.
And it was I don't want to say it was sneaky, but it's sort of one of those deals where you hear people talk about well, why do we have to have all these shows with women leads and that sort of thing? And people say, well, that's just sort of like um, a woke television show or that sort of thing. But what Andor did was it took these characters that they were organic characters, they were absolutely necessary for the telling of the story, and quite frankly, like I said, 95% of them were women, and they had to be, and they needed to be, and they were, and they were incredible. So the first one is Bix. She was a kick-ass engineer, um, girlfriend of the sort of at least the star of the show in title.
Mm-hmm.
But she was the one who essentially put him in first contact with the head of the spy network of the rebellion that essentially brought down the empire. So Cassian Andor doesn't get to become one of the heroes that steals the Death Star plans without Bix Gleam.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's one. His adoptive mother, Marva, obviously took him in when he was a boy, raised him, um, but she was also the one who you would consider her a quote unquote grandmotherly type, but she was fierce into the rebellion. It was her posthumous speech that led her planet to finally rise up and rebel against the Empire. And that was the essentially the turning point for the star of the show. It was at that point there was no turning back for him. He was part of this rebellion and he was going to see it to the end, and it was all because of his quote unquote grandmotherly sort of figure. So Marva is a fantastic character on the show and one of my women of the week. Dedra is sort of a an imperial middle manager who, even though this is a show a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, it still revolved around an empire that did not treat its women fairly well, and she was sort of indoctrinated into the empire at a young age, and she obviously saw that um, she was not going to gain the favor that she needed to. She was not going to be able to achieve the things that she did unless she did more and better things than the officers that were around her. Her only fatal flaw was that she did those things so well that she became arrogant to the point where it led to her downfall. But every time she was on screen as a villain, it was absolutely delicious and fun. um, the character of Clea, um, part of sort of this mother-father, I'm sorry, father-daughter duo who were sort of the head of Axis, which was the spy network that made up the rebellion. Um, and again, they appear to be quite um, partners quite well with the father and daughter in this relationship. Come to find out by the end of the series, there's a flashback episode that sort of revealed the dynamic of the relationship and flipped it on its head. You
Mm-hmm.
come to realize that she was the driving force behind Axis. She was the reason that the quote unquote father figure sort of found a reason and a purpose to do what he did. But quite frankly, you absolutely positively understand that she was the driving force behind Axis. She was the reason that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another character, Mon Mothma. Even if you don't know Star Wars, you probably know that character.
Mm-hmm.
She was an incredibly powerful person as far as the rebellion was concerned. But we see her at a time when she's disillusioned with her place in the Senate, and she realizes that politics is not what's going to sort of win this war against the Empire, and as such, she has had to eschew all of the things, all of the comforts that she's had, her husband, her daughter, her place in the Senate, all of the things that come with the history of being in the position that she's in. But she gave them all up because she could not stand one more day to be under the oppressive fascism that was the empire. And she couldn't stand it any longer, and she had to give all that up um, to join the rebellion and be a leader in that sense, which was she essentially gave up everything that she knew and everything that she had. My last two women are Vel and Cinta, a dynamic duo in almost every sense of the word. I don't know that they were the first lesbian couple in Star Wars, but they are the most memorable as far as I'm concerned. And the only reason I bring that up is because it's sort of important to note those sorts of things on Disney Plus shows. Um, but they were the characters when Axis needed like brains or brawn or anything. If there was a significant heist that had to happen, if there was a significant mission that had to happen, quite frankly, if there was someone that had to be taken out, it was Vel and it was Cinta who were sent in to handle that sort of business. So that was incredibly cool to see. Um, and like I said, altogether, they made up my Women of the Week. I can't recommend watching Andor any more than I can. Fantastic show. It should win all the awards award season. Those are my Women of the Week.
Mhm.
I love that. That was such a good rundown. I loved Andor season one. Loved. And I have Andor season two slotted to watch in like mid June because I'm doing I'm participating in like a podcast panel review on it that will be recorded at the end of June. So I want it like super fresh. So I'm having to like wait. Oh, but I'm so excited. I'm so excited to watch season two of Andor, and I'm very pro spoilers. That gets me more excited. So
Well, I tried to give them without giving away too much.
I'm okay. I am okay with all the spoilers. Andor season one was phenomenal. Phenomenal. I have high expectations for season two. Absolutely.
Season two is better, and I could not believe after watching season one I'd
Wow.
be able to say it, but it is. And I
That's
don't,
high
and I
praise.
don't, yeah, it is.
I'm excited. I'll dive right into my woman of the week because I'm making a late game decision change.
Mhm.
I had originally slated to have as my woman of the week somebody from the Jeopardy Masters tournament. Last time I did that, she lost. They're playing tonight. We can't take any risks. She's going to have to stay backburnered. My women of the week are all of the women of the WNBA. The WNBA regular season just started within this past week or so. And I have just gone full force, obsessed, worse, more annoying than I was last year. I've already been to two games live, if you'll believe it. I've watched pretty much every single game that's aired since then. I am just 100% all in. Um, and these women, within the basketball is not really supposed to be like a quote unquote contact sport, but within these like this first week, I've observed a billion injuries because they are incredibly scrappy and have a much higher pain tolerance than the MNBA. So my women of the week are all of the women of the WNBA. I really have a problem where I'm like, I will watch games and I genuinely want both teams to win, which is not like me. I love rooting against people, but that's where we're at. Even to the point, I mean, like I hope it's okay to call it the star player. Caitlin Clark out for 2 weeks from an injury. Brittany Griner, star player for the local Atlanta team here. She's been out for 2 games for injury. Like injuries abound, which is like sad, but like it's because they play so well, of course. It's incredible, incredible to watch. Those are my
Agree.
women of the week.
Mhm. Mine are people that take themselves equally seriously. This is a serious matter.
Yes.
Serious. The Haim sisters have been in anticipation of their upcoming album in June. Woo woo. All of their singles are like redo photo ops of iconic early aughts paparazzi pictures. They've recently announced a new single coming out on Friday, and it's another one where it's the Keira Knightley, Jamie Dornan picture.
Yes.
It's just funny, and it's funny too. Every time they announce one, it takes 5 seconds for somebody to pin down exactly which paparazzi picture it is. I wasn't really in the consciousness at that time, but I find this bit is really funny. I enjoy artists that take themselves really seriously when it's really serious art that they're really doing something really impactful. But I also really appreciate and find it refreshing when there's an artist that is so committed to not taking themselves too seriously that are they're just they're having fun and they're letting people know they're having fun. And that's always kind of been their bit is like that they're three sisters that love each other and love doing stuff together, and so they put out really fun music. But especially this album rollout that feels like especially at the forefront. The whole "I Quit" thing is really in. They haven't come out and directly said it, but Danielle is the main songwriter and singer, and she went through a massive breakup with a man who I think she'd been dating the entire of her like public music career, that she had been putting out albums. He had been producing all of their albums, and this is the first album he is not a main producer on. And so there is remnants of like, I'm quitting the things that are holding me behind, they're holding me back, and I am celebrating the things that make me me and make me happy. And so there is elements of like, the like breaking up and like the kind of shoving off a guy that is not good for you. I may not relate to, but I am very much into the idea of like, there's the celebration of just having what you have and enjoying that, and then also looking back at your youth and your childhood, and kind of going, I didn't know what I had, and I wish I would have celebrated myself more back then. And those are the kind of elements that they're really leaning into, and I'm really enjoying it. So it's exciting to see while also being, very playful.
I love that. That is like the perfect end bow on top. I loved both of y'all's Women of the Weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have a question.
Not a question, but an addendum to my Women of the Week because I can't believe I did not include this additional person. But it's Kathleen Kennedy, the head of Lucasfilm, and the reason why I want to name her as Woman of the Week is because again, Andor has been a fantastic show. Andor season 2 has been phenomenal. And the person behind that, Tony Gilroy, has come out publicly and said that the show would never have happened if Kathleen Kennedy did not champion it because there were efforts to stop. It's a risky season. There are a lot of things that
It
happen in
is.
season 2, and so it's a risky show, and the show would not have happened without Kathleen Kennedy. She's gotten a lot of grief and a lot of, you know what, from folks who crap on her
Mm-hmm.
for the state of Star Wars. But if you're going to crap on her for the state of Star Wars, you need to give her her flowers for being behind one of the greatest shows, in my opinion, that's been on Disney Plus and that Star Wars has done in its entire 50-year history. So I just wanted to give her her flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, female creators. Love that. Well, Kate and Carrie's information is in the description down below. If you have any comments or questions about what we talked about or what we might be watching over the course of the next few weeks as we enter the summer months and we get into the Netflix dropping whole seasons of this and lots of reality shows that you all do not watch. So we'll be keeping an eye out for that. And I will talk to you all soon. Bye.